chapter of James and move into the fourth chapter. And probably sometime next month, Bill will finish up James. We'll move on to First Peter. But anyway, if you'll remember, we've been talking pretty much in this chapter about the overall thing is about teachers, but the dangers of letting your tongue get out of control. And then this last few verses that we were considering last week, we were talking about false wisdom and good wisdom. And that's kind of where we're gonna pick up today. I'm gonna go back and hit verses 14 and 15 real quick to kind of bring us into verse 16 to give it some context and everything. But one of the things I think that we need to keep in mind is when we're studying James the entire way through is who he was talking to. He told us right at the very beginning that he was talking to the Jews that were the Jews that were spread afar, and he's being very careful and to use terminology and use illustrations that the Jews are going to understand. And this I've said before that the scholarship and the words that James chose my inspiration is really pretty impressive. So before we go any further, I'd like for Jeff Davis, if you would, to lead our minds in prayer. Let's briefly look at verses 13 and 14 and 15. It says, "But if you have bitter jealousy and strife in your hearts, do not glory and lie against the truth. This is not the wisdom coming down from above, but is an earthly, sensual, and devilish." So, we have to, kind of look at what people consider to be wisdom. And if it's things that are earthly and sensual and devilish, it's not something that comes down from above. There's people out there that they think they're a little bit smarter than everybody else. And when you start really looking at the things that they're saying, basically they're talking about things that are envious and quarrelsome, and they have a contentious spirit. And these are not the things that that God sends down from heaven. And this wisdom doesn't come from above. It doesn't come from God, because God is the Father of lights. Of course, Christ would not be teaching things that weren't coming down from the Father. And when they do these things, they really hide the good things and try to give you the impression that the things here of the earth are good. And these Jews at this time, they were kind of making up things as they went along, and they couldn't get away from all of their old teachings and things. And one of the things that I've kind of gathered from studying this, we talk a lot about the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but there was a lot of other sects in the Jewish religion at that time, and they were all kind of jockeying for position. There was a lot of confusion and a lot of false wisdom that was out there, and these were things that were being debated in these new churches, and it was causing a lot of problems. And James recognized this and had a very good understanding of the mindset of the Jews and how they thought about things. So then he kind of sums this up in verse 16. He says, where envy and strife are, there is confusion and every foul deed. So basically, all of this false wisdom that these people were spewing out there was doing nothing but causing confusion and discord in these young churches. They didn't have a firm foundation like a lot of churches have today. They didn't have the advantage of having the full revelation like we do today. And they didn't have people who had had years and years and years of studying the New Testament to, to dispute the things that these other people were, these other people were saying. And a lot of times these people who have this false wisdom, they kind of have a powerful personality, and they can call, they kind of force these things on people, and you get the people fighting against each other, and that's what James is talking about here. It's one person saying one thing, another person saying something else, and it's causing confusion, and as a result of that, we're seeing a lot of evil works and things that that the Father was not was not happy about, and it puts people in a position where they're doing things that are against the will of God. And a lot of times this goes back, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. It goes back to gratifying people's own lusts and pleasure, and to justify the things that they're doing. Probably the Jews were of all the people that were living at that time, they were probably the most intolerant of all of the different groups. And one of the maxims that the Jews had around this time was they were very quick to kill somebody that didn't conform with their laws. Look at Stephen. They weren't real happy with Stephen, so what did they do to him? They took him out and killed him, because in their mind, if you didn't believe the things that they believed and didn't conform to the law as they saw it, then they didn't feel like that you had any hope of salvation. You were saving. So I mean, that's a pretty tough nut to crack sometimes when you're dealing with somebody who's completely intolerant to the things that you're saying. And this is the result of this false wisdom that these people had. Comments about those verses? Right, 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 right. The other comments? All right, let's look at verse 17. But the wisdom that is from above is first truly pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. So these are the things that God is the author of, and the ones who have the Spirit of God. These are the traits that they have, and these are the traits of the people that's going to go to heaven, and the ones who really have the true wisdom and knowledge of God, because they possess these things, and they live the things that they possess. And this is where the real wisdom comes in. They have a pure heart. They're free from all the things of earth and all the carnal and devilish things, and they look at things in a pure standpoint. Their conversation is pure. They don't have any ulterior motives to undercut people. In other words, they're kind of like a small child. A small child's heart is pure, and they only see the good in things. And where we corrupt them is where we show them the things that aren't like this, and that they learn these things as they go along. And the Christian is a peaceable person. They look to live in peace. They don't bother their neighbors. They don't bother other people. They look to get along. They're kind of gentle, and they're humane, and they put up with a lot of things that maybe they shouldn't have to put up with. They do, because they want to live in peace, and they want everybody else to live in peace. I thought this phrase here, "easy to be entreated," was kind of an interesting thought here. And if you go back to the original meaning, it's talking about somebody here who has an open mind, and if they see something that is of superior judgment, or somebody that has a really strong reasoning, their mind is open to changing for the better. And it's not in the case of, well, that sounds like a good thing, I'm going to follow it. It's a thoughtful type of judgment. For do what now? Right, really yield to yield. So they if they have a good opinion of somebody, and somebody gives them a sound argument or discussion about something, and they see that this way is superior, then that they will follow that, as long as it's grounded in the truth. We also see that one of the wisdoms is being full of mercy and good fruits. This is compassion, benevolence to the poor, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the widows and the orphans, and doing good works for other people, not expecting to get any type of compensation in return, because their compensation is going to be later on. These are good things that not only reflect well on that person, but they also reflect well on the church. And of course, here lately, Luke has talked a lot about that, about doing good works for other people. And it says here, without partiality, to one another, and making a difference between the people, not showing, well, we respect all persons. And yes, showing no respect to persons is probably not a good way to say it. We treat everybody alike. And we don't look at their social status, and we don't look at things along that line. We treat everybody with respect, and honor the things that they do, and don't make any distinction between the people.
Basically, repeating what he said in chapter 2.
Right.
Being having favoritism.
Right. And then here at the end it says, without hypocrisy, and this is without hypocrisy with respect to God or to man. In other words, we say what we mean, and we do what we say, and we're not saying one thing and doing something else. And nobody likes a hypocrite. And there's plenty written in the New Testament about the problems with hypocrites. And hypocrisy is not something that comes from God. God is consistent in everything that He does, and He wants His children to be consistent in everything that they do. Comments about that verse? Okay, let's go on and look at verse 18. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So the whole is the principle of righteousness in the soul, and all the virtues are the fruits of the righteousness. And we see again here that this is sown in peace. And when peace of God rules the heart, all the virtues and graces, they start to flow and flow in abundance. And it says here, of them that make peace, the peacemakers are continually recommending this wisdom to others, and their own conduct is represented as sowing the heavenly seeds that come from above. And of course, one of the things that we are blessed, if we are a peacemaker, God blesses the peacemaker. And somebody who is a peacemaker, they have to sow peace a little bit. You got a bunch of people that's contentious. Sometimes you have to plant the seed and let that seed of peacefulness grow, and eventually, you're going to be successful. And you talk about somebody who goes and negotiates a dispute of some kind. They have to go in there with a lot of wisdom, and they have to go slow, and they have to kind of plant the seeds, because sometimes people have to go home and think about stuff. and you kind of plant the seed, and you water that seed a little bit, and the seed grows, and finally, you get the type of peace. And all of these traits are very important in a congregation to make sure that you have a strong congregation. So kind of to sum this up, it's the peaceful fruits of righteousness are sown for the practitioners of peace. He who labors to live peacefully shall have peace for his reward. So, to kind of sum up this chapter, we're talking about teachers. We're talking about how teachers present things, and the dangers of presenting them in the wrong way, and also the problem of presenting the wrong information, and having the false wisdom. And like I kind of said before, James was very careful here, and he used a lot of writings of the Jews, and referenced these, because without drawing these comparisons with the things that these Jews had practiced for centuries, they weren't going to get the meaning if he didn't present them in this particular way. Comments about that verse or about that chapter? Okay, so let's do a little bit of modern technology here and move on to the next chapter. Got to change my program. Okay, so following the discussion of peace in the final verses of the third chapter, James here passes into a kind of an easy transition to that of war and conflict in this portion of his epistle here. Now, in the preceding section, there was a sharply drawn contrast between the two kinds of wisdom, the ones which can be traced to its source and its characteristics designated, being the wisdom of man or the wisdom of God. And he points to the readers, which is us, to the disastrous consequences involved in the following the wrong type of wisdom. We need to follow the wisdom that is from above, because it has all the good things, and not the wisdom of man, which can lead us to destruction. Okay, so let's look at verse 1. It says, "Whence came wars and whence came fighting among you? Come they not hence, even your pleasures that war in your members?" Now, in some of the translations, it substitutes the word lust for pleasure there, but the same the same meaning in the original term is there. It just depends on the term that the translator decides to stick into that particular passage. So it appears quite certain that James has under consideration here the strife and the dissension and the warfare that's there in the church and in there between individuals in the church. And I think it's pretty obvious that he's using this in a figurative manner. They're not actually having a war. They're not actually shooting and killing each other in a deal like this. And, we use, war and things along this same line in a figurative way also. But we see here that, he sees that this contention is going on in the churches here, and this is a problem. And his words are especially applicable to the situation that prevailed in the day in which he lived. And he saw it in his own congregation in Jerusalem, but he also apparently had knowledge of this being a common problem in all of the churches involving the Jews. And there was a lot of bitter contentions in the world in the first century. And you had the contention between the Jews and the Romans. The Romans at this particular time, they were pretty much all over the world, trying to conquer people. So there was a lot of wars, and there was a lot of contention between the Jews and the Romans. But there was also a lot of contention and divisions among the Jews themselves. You had all these different sects. You had the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which, those two didn't get along. They each thought that they were right and the other one was wrong. You had the Herodians, the Essenians, and the Zealots also, and all these groups were fighting each other to I guess to get dominance in the religion now. Now these Herodians were supporters of Herod, and he was a Jewish political leader who collaborated quite a bit with the Romans, and this collaboration would have required a compromised observance of the Mosaic law, because the the Romans, they tolerated the Jews. They didn't believe anything that they say. They just pretty much tolerated them. And Herod was a politician, and he was real good at kind of keeping the Romans happy and keeping the Jews happy. And if it took a little bit of compromise of the Mosaic law, well, then that was okay, because he was in charge, and he knew more than everybody else, like a typical politician. They don't know a whole lot until they get elected, and all of a sudden they know everything. Right. Yeah. Sometimes he's like other politicians. Sometimes the most important thing is the reelection, not doing the right thing. So but the Pharisees, on the other hand, they taught just absolutely scrupulous observance of the Mosaical law, and of course they were completely opposed to the Roman occupation. And the Pharisees, they kind of went overboard in some ways of trying to observe the law of Moses, and to the point of being ridiculous. But they were very political themselves, and probably of all these groups, they probably had the majority of the people. Now these Essenes, they had a point of view that they believed in a new kingdom of some kind that was going to be coming, but it would not necessarily be brought in with the Messiah. And the idea that the coming kingdom is always to be accompanied by the Messiah figure is not entirely accurate for the Jews in this particular period. They really didn't have the concept, and it was obvious, from reading things in the New Testament, that they really didn't have the concept of a spiritual kingdom. All they could see was an earthly kingdom. And there's some ample evidence in the New Testament that the converts to Christianity from Judaism often brought with them, their contentious spirit, and urged that their views be the ones that were considered by the brethren. And Paul wrote about this a lot in the second chapter of Colossians, in verses 20 and 22. So James provides some clear evidence here that these things were there, and they were something that needed to be dealt with without causing any type of conflict in the church. And it wasn't just confined to the local church, but this was something that we saw in Corinth and in Galatia. Paul wrote about these things also. There's a lot written in there about circumcision. That was a hot topic at the time, and it had a tendency to divide a lot of the congregations, because you had one group saying, well, it's not necessary anymore. Then you had another group that said, oh, absolutely, it's necessary. And it was a problem that that Paul had, and the early church fathers had to deal with. Now the early church was thus by no means free of difficulty, while there was a lot of there was a lot of problems, and that we can conclude that was there. And if they weren't dealt with immediately and dealt with properly, then it was going to destroy the local congregations, and thus destroy the church. So, James is looking back, and he's trying to discern all the things that that's going on. So he's telling these people, what's the source of the problem that you're having here, that you've got a basically a war, and in the original text, the word means quarrel or a wrangle, and or a prevailing strife, and it's distinguished from a specific conflict designated by a certain thing. This was something that wasn't a short-term thing, and it was maybe a little bit different angle in all the different churches. One church would have one area of dispute, another church would have another area of dispute, but the results were going to be the same if they weren't fixed. And what it resulted in is there was a fighting among the people, and it was dividing the church, as though it was a war and a fighting and a clash between all of these different thoughts. And if it's not taken care of, then there's going to be a problem. So what James's goal was to get peace among this group, because peace is probably one of the best temporal blessings that we've got. Not only peace among people and peace throughout the world, but also being at peace with yourself, and not going to bed every night and with a war raging in your head about what was going on. You had to be at peace with yourself. And it's very rare for peace to exist at every level. You can maybe be at peace with yourself, but you can have men fighting among themselves. You can have nations fighting among themselves. I mean, look at today. You know, there's not a whole lot of peace going on in this world. Got problems in the Middle East, got problems in Russia, got problems over around with China and that bunch over there. They're not at war yet, but it's a turmoil situation over there. And this is kind of a commentary about what happens when man is put in charge. And it wasn't any different then than it is now. These conflicts were going on then, and there was interconflict. There was conflict in the church. There was conflict in the government, and then there was conflict between nations. And James is trying to at least control the things that are going on between the Christians and the congregation themselves, and have some type of control over it.
You don't get your spiritual house cleaned up. You don't wish for the right things. You don't ask for the right things. Then you're going to bring that baggage into the congregation. Other people are going to bring their baggage in. We got a mess.
Right.
But take care of yourself and check yourself first.
Right. And one of the things we mentioned in the beginning here, talking about these different groups. One of the groups that was probably the fiercest and most headstrong, even really probably more than the Pharisees, and probably the most dangerous in these congregations, was the Zealots. And if you go back and you look at history, especially during the time of when Titus was attacking and destroying Jerusalem, the Zealots were the ones who were leading the fight, and they pulled away, and they went to I can't remember the name of the enclave, but they went to an enclave, and they fought for years and years, against the Romans. I mean, they were just as fierce and set in their way as anybody that you would to come up on. And even today, the word zealot means somebody that's just absolutely, completely, overwhelmingly dedicated to whatever the cause might be. Masada, yeah. So if you get somebody like that in a congregation, they're not going to yield. They're going to hang in there as long as they can, and and what you have to do sometimes is maybe get rid of them, because somebody like that can really cause a problem in the church. And I don't think it's any accident that there's provisions in the Bible for withdrawing fellowship from people. Comments? All right, let's go on to verse 2 and 3. Ye lust and have not, ye kill and covet and cannot obtain, ye fight and war, ye have not because ye ask not. Ye ask and receive not because ye ask amiss, that ye may spend it in your pleasures. So again, we can substitute the word lust for pleasures in this translation. And in the original text, the word is in what's called the active indicative, which means that it's a strong passion for. So he's using very strong terms here, that this is an intense problem and an intense feeling that's a characteristic of the people that James is writing to here. So he's wanting to know, why are we doing these wars? Why are we doing this fighting, which he's alluding to there in verse 1. So coveting was what another has is a problem, whether it's on the individual, the national, or the international level. And a lot of times that's the basic cause of wars, is somebody or something or some country, they lust after something that somebody else has. You think about the war in Ukraine. Why did that war start? Well, because Russia wanted part of Ukraine back. There was a lust there, and people in a congregation can be just as bad on a local level. Somebody wants something that somebody else has, or maybe even different. They want a position that somebody else has, and they're going to go to war, as it were, to get that position and undermine the things that are going on, so that they can be in charge. And I have seen that in congregations where you have a person or maybe a group that they want to be the ones that's preeminent, so they do everything they can to undermine the authority of the elders, to try to get the things that they want. So when the desire of the character is entertained and encouraged, it becomes overpowering and the dominant thing going on in somebody's life. If this is allowed to continue in the congregations, then it's going to grow and it's going to grow, and that's going to be the center of attention. The fight that's going on is going to be the center of attention, not the worship of God. When they come to the worship service, they're more concerned about the politics that's going on inside the congregation than they are with the things that of God that needs to be taken care of. So he's talking about these desires. He's talking about asking the proper way. And why is this going on? Well, because you're not asking the right question. You're not asking the right way. And if or they're asking for the wrong thing. Their question and their way that they're approaching the situation is more concerned with their own lust and asking it for their benefit, not asking it for the benefit of the congregation. So as a result of this, they're not getting the results that they want. The underlying motive is not correct. And as a result, they've got all these other problems. So they're fighting a war among themselves. So they haven't asked. They have not got what they want because they have not asked, or they've asked, but they've asked the improper. They've asked the wrong question. They've asked it the improper way. Correct. Very good. Right. usually God gives them an answer, and the answer is they don't usually throw their money away. Yeah. I mean, he says here they ask amiss, and the term that's used in the original text is they ask evilly. Their motive is not pure, and wrong motive. Okay. Yeah, I try to look at all these different translations because some of them I think use better terminology than the King James version does. So we learn a lesson that selfishness is involved sometimes in our petitions to God, and when selfishness is the motive, then sometimes our most of the time our prayers go unanswered. But there are things I think that we can selfishly ask for. We can selfishly ask for more wisdom. I think that's something to make us better doing something. That's kind of the selfish mode, and I think that God will grant us those things because our motive is pure. And if it's something that we ask for selfishly to help us serve God better, I think that's a prayer that God is going to hear because we've got the proper motive. Like Philip said, praying to God to win the lottery is probably not the best thing that we need to do. So we see here that we can ask amiss and not get the things that we want. So we want to stay away from asking for things because of our own lust and things that will give us our own pleasure. So one this last phrase here, that you may spend it in your pleasures. In the original word, it means signifying something that can be consumed wastefully or to squander. We do it for something that really doesn't mean anything. And the pleasure here is the same word that was used back in verse 1. Talking about fleshly and sensual and satisfying ourselves rather than satisfying God. Comments about those verses? Okay, let's just stop right here, and we'll pick up with verse 4 next week. And there's a lot to say here about verse 4. So I appreciate everybody's attention, comments.